Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are diving into the world of AWS EKS. Whether you are new to Kubernetes or just looking to get your own cluster up and running on AWS, this step-by-step guide will show you how to set up your very own EKS cluster. Follow the channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, kindly subscribe. I wouldn't say much because I want this video to be short as possible. So before we set up the EKS cluster, there's a few things that we need to have, in other words, prerequisites. And what are those prerequisites? The one is to create an IAM user and give it administrator access, and then also Amazon EKS cluster policy. The other thing is also we'll create an IAM role for the user, as well as create an IAM policy. So without further ado, let's look at the process through which we will create the cluster. And before that, I would like to mention the IAM policies that we need for the cluster. And that is, the first one is the Amazon EC2 container registry read only. The second one is the Amazon EKS worker node policy, because we'll be creating a worker node. We also need an Amazon EKS CNI policy, which is basically networking, a network policy. So these are the IAM policy that we need to set up. Now, when you come to the IAM page, Identity and Access Management, you can see I already have a user created. And when you come to this, let's select the user. It's loading. So yes, I already have a user created, and then also I already assigned administrator access as well as the IAM user. That's for Amazon EKS cluster policy as well. So these are the two policies that we need to assign to the user. The other thing is I have created a user role. Not yet, because I want us to do this together. So I will create the user role. This is the role that I'm going to create for the user. So to create a role, we need to click on create role, and then select the AWS service and select the role or for the service, the service for the role, and in this case EC2. So we are going to create a policy role for the EC2 instance, which is the worker node. So we select EC2. That's the service or the use case is EC2. Then we click on next. Now afterwards, we set the permissions or policies. So I mentioned 3 policies that we need to add to the role, which is the Amazon EC2 container registry read only. So let's go through the list and see what we have. So Amazon EC2 container registry read only. So this is the policy. This is one. The other policy is the Amazon EKS worker node. EKS worker node policy. Okay, so here is it. And then the last one is the Amazon EKS CNI policy, which is here. Now that we have all the policies in place, we click on next. Now we need to give the role a name, so that when we are creating the cluster, we'll be able to choose and then attach it to the cluster. So here, let's say demo EKS role. we already have the description here. So allow EC2 instance to call AWS service on your behalf, which is the IAM user. So we will leave everything as it is and then just click on create the role. So the role is being created. As you can see, the role has been created successfully. So when you go back to the IAM dashboard and then click on roles, so as you can see, this is the role that has been created. You can also preview the role and check the policies that has been attached to the role. So these are the policies. These 3 policies has been attached to the role. Now that we have this in place, we can go ahead and start creating our EKS cluster. So here on the, if you don't have, I've already opened it, but if you don't have access to the EKS cluster, you can search it here, EKS, which will, depending on the speed of your network. So yes, so as you can see, we just click on it, Amazon EKS, and then it will bring us to the page. So as you can see, we have EKS and then cluster. So here we are going to create a cluster. Now we click on the button here, create cluster. Now we give the cluster a name, which is demo-EKS-cluster. So that's the name of the cluster. Now we'll select the cluster service role. So remember, we created this role earlier. So let's see if we don't have the role. Okay, so here we can create the role. We can create the role. So yes, so select the trusted identity, which is the AWS service, and here we are creating a cluster. So we'll have to select EKS cluster, not EKS, but rather EKS cluster. The next thing is to select next. Now this is the permission that has been assigned, so we'll click on next and then give the role a name, demo EKS role, EKS cluster role. Okay, so just preview it and then click on next. So to create the role, so let's create a role. So the role has been created successfully. The next thing, so as you can see, here is the role that has been created. This is the one we created for the EC2, that's the IAM user. The next thing is to continue. Let's reload. Now as you can see, the role that we created for the cluster has appeared here. Then we'll leave the version of the Kubernetes as default. The extended that upgrade policy to, let's leave it as default, and then cluster authentication will use EKS API and then config map, and then we click on next. Now we will need to select the VPC that will attach to the cluster. So let's select, I've already created a VPC, so maybe in my subsequent videos we will learn how to create a VPC and then set up the subnet, security groups and all of that. So we select the VPC. Now we are deploying the cluster in the EKS cluster in a public subnet, because the idea here is for the application to be accessed in a public. So we need to remove the private subnets and then leave 2 public subnets. Now the next thing is to select the security group. So we'll select web access. I also created default security groups already. So these are all prerequisites though, but this is beyond this video, so I don't want to make the video long. Now the other thing is to, because we are deploying, we assume that we are deploying the application in the public space. So we will select public and then click on next. Then we leave everything as default and then next. So this will load. We also leave the add-ons as default and then click on next. This will also everything default and then we click on next. So here we review all the configurations that we've done and then create the AKS cluster. So as you can see, we have the cluster configuration information here, everything that we configured. We didn't create any tags, but we'll just move on. So you can see the networking, the cluster network here. We have the VPC and then the IPv4 family that we chose. We have the subnet and then the security group. We have the cluster endpoint access, which is public because we assume we are deploying the application in the public so that it can be accessed externally. Then everything looks good. The next thing is to click on create. So here the cluster is being created. As you can see, here the status is it is being created. We also have the Kubernetes version, the Kubernetes version here, and so the provider is EKS. So here are a few things that you will need to use. These are more like tables that provide different options to how you manage your cluster. So we can see the resources here. So here you'll be able to see the port template and all the things that deployment, stateful set, daemon set, jobs, cron jobs, everything that you need to manage your cluster will be displayed under the resources. So you can see we have the cluster information here. We have the nodes, the namespace, the API service, leases, and any other cluster management services that you need will be displayed here. So we have the service and networking, config and secret, storage, authentication, authorization, policy extensions. Then you come to the compute. So under the compute, you can see the cluster is still creating. So we are getting this error here. We say cluster not found. But once the cluster is fully created and active, this error message will no longer be here. So you can see we don't have a node group yet. We also don't have nodes because we haven't deployed any application into the cluster yet. So the other thing is that we have to create a node group, because this is what we would need to deploy the application and then create the nodes as well. So let's the cluster is still being created, so we'll keep looking. Then we have the networking. So here you'll be able to see all the networking the cluster network information. So as you can see, we have the information on the VPC, the IP. So you can see the service IP range that we have here. We have the subnet. So these are two public subnets, and then the cluster security group, which is this one. As you can see, is also being created. This is a managed node, so AWS will handle all these services. And then we also have the cluster API endpoint, which is public, so you can see it is open to all traffic. And then we also have the add-ons here. So basically these are add-ons that you can, so all these add-ons are currently being created. So as you can see, creating you can click on this to get more add-ons depending on your cluster needs. And then we also have access. So the configuration we choose is AKS API and then the config map. So you can see the IAM principal, RAN, which is also here. So all these table that you are seeing here is help us to be able to manage the cluster. We also have observability. So if you enable any observability, you'll be able to see more information about the cluster here. You can see we have CloudWatch, which gives you insight into the cluster to know what's happening, whether the cluster is using more resources, and if you have to create, like add maybe auto scaling or something, you'll be able to do all those here. Okay, and then the upgrade inside. So here you get upgrade information on the cluster, upgrade information here. Then the update history. So you every yeah, as long as you use the cluster, you'll be able to see update history of the cluster here. If you update the cluster, you see the updated history here. Okay, so let's check. The cluster is still being created at this point. So let's see, what do we have here? So all the rows have been created successfully. Okay, so I'm gonna pause this video, and then while the cluster is created, we'll continue with the video. We'll continue with the setup. So as you can see, the cluster is successfully created. You can see the status is active. Now we need to create our worker node, which is there. So we go to compute, and then click on add node group. Then type the name, so demo dash node group. So you can see the node IAM row that we created earlier has been selected. The next thing is to we don't need any, we are not launching from a template, so we leave everything as it is, and then click on next. So the AMI type, we'll leave it as default. The capacity type, we'll leave it. The instance type, we are using T2 nano. So yes, T2 nano. This is for demo purposes, so we'll choose T2 nano. And then let's select 10. Then we leave everything as default. Depending on your application requirement, you might want to make changes to the node group scaling configuration, but this is for demo purposes, so I'm going to leave everything as default. And then also the node group update configuration will leave, you can choose any of this, either the percentage or the number, but for them, this is for demo purpose, so we'll leave it as number, and then the value will leave it as 1, and then click on next. Now let's select the subnet. So yeah, so in the previous configuration we chose the public subnet, so you can see those have been selected here. Remote access node, this is for demo purpose, so we'll just leave it as it is, and then click on next. And now let's review. So this is the review of our configuration. Everything is fine. Now let's create the node group. So yes, our nodes group is being created. So you can see we have the node group ARN here, which is this. Created a few seconds ago. Auto scaling group is being created. The node IAM row ARN is also being created. We have the capacity type here as on demand. We have the desired size. We have 2 nodes. Minimum, we have 2 nodes. Maximum, also we have 2 nodes. We have our subnet groups here. Health is, so this gives you visibility into the health of your cluster. As you can see, we haven't deployed anything yet, so the node group is still being created, and so once it's done, you can see it appeared here. We also have cluster labels. We've not set any cluster labels. Config updates, yes, we have a maximum unavailable is 1 node is unavailable at the moment. I mean, this is still being created. So, and then we have update history. We've looked at this already. So yes, let's wait for the worker node to create. As you can see, the status is still creating. So our worker nodes, as you can see, we have 2 nodes running, which has been launched successfully, but it's still not ready because it's still being created fully. So once it's done, you can see the status will change to ready. So let's keep refreshing. Still not ready. Yeah, so the cluster status is still active. So yes, as you can see, the node group is still being created, and that is why we have the node status as not ready. Once the node group is fully created, you see that the status of the node will change. See, okay, so one of the node is ready. As you can see, the status has changed to ready. See the other one still creating. Yes. Yeah, so depending on the nature of your application, these things takes time as well. So you just have to be patient. So let's see. It should be ready anytime soon. So you can literally check the status of this one. So as you can see, this is the first node that was created successfully, which is 5 minutes ago. You can see the status is ready a minute ago. The last transition time is a minute ago. We have the OS architecture, which is Linux AMD 64. And then the OS image is Amazon Linux 2. Kernel version is the kernel version, the node group. And then the instance details, which is the instance type is T2 Nano. And as you can see, these are the capacity allocations. So once you deploy an application on the node and your pods are running, all these static states will start changing. Yes. So as you can see, we have some pods that are, these are like default Kubernetes pods that are running. Let's go back and check the status of the other node. Refresh. Should be ready. So yes, exactly. So as you can see, the other node is also ready, and yes, you can see now the node group status is what? Active. So this is how you set up a Kubernetes cluster in AWS. If you have any questions, just comment in the comment section below. Kindly subscribe to the channel, and see you in the next video.